I have never officially told this story, and it's probably one of the most embarrassing things that has ever happened to me. But this is the true story of forgiveness, the true story of vindication, and the true story of friendship, and the real story of just how big Ed Bullion's heart is. So, in 2005, 2006, when I was first starting and I was trying to be this flashy young go-getter, in my head, I thought I was an incredible entrepreneur, and I was starting to produce these car events. And I was really, really consumed by driving some cool car. I mean, I didn't really have the money. I was, at one point I was renting a Hertz rental car and praying that it would actually go through on my credit card, but I was really struggling. And if you've watched the videos about how the Palm Beach Supercar Weekend show started, while we were generating a ton of press and a ton of sort of sponsorships and all these things, we had no money, really. And we were trying to just keep up with sort of appearances and sort of keep up with the Joneses, as they say. I had built a relationship with Ed Bullion, and he was doing a TV show on MTV with his first Audi. And we had met through that, and we were trying to do deals, and we had built this great friendship, and we were two young guys talking about cars and sort of our dreams and hopes, and Ed had started this rental car company. At the time, I had a little bit of money, I had some credit cards, and I was looking to potentially rent or own an interesting exotic car, and there was this opportunity where Ed was willing to send me, I think it was a '04 pearl yellow Lamborghini Gallardo, an E-gear car. It sort of worked because I could promote Palm Beach Supercar Weekend. I wrapped the car, I did all these cool things, and I would basically pay Ed for the miles. So it would sort of help him in his startup days. It would help me in my startup days, and I felt like everyone was going to win from this, and even the potential to try to rent the car while it was with me in Palm Beach. So there was this sort of very enthusiastic spirit when we first started this relationship and transaction. I ended up driving the car for about 6 months, 7 months. I actually fell in love with the car, and it became a part of my identity. And, my terrible business partner at the time, well, not official business partner, but buddy that gave me these grand ideas of growing this supercar event. Drove a red, beautiful Rosso Scuderia 360 Challenge Stradale. And, this yellow Gallardo sort of matched well. We used it for press. We used it for all these different things. I even went out to a few different of the banks at the time to try to get finance on this car because I was actually really excited about owning it, and I thought it'd be an awesome car. So I was literally driving it every day. And one night, and this was when I was in my wild young days, I was out one night at Players Club in Wellington. We're having a few drinks. I don't remember exactly how many, and we were all leaving. There was a group of us. We're driving along, I believe it was 441. So if you know 441, it's a wide open road, and we're all cruising together, and it was like super cool, and I've got the windows down, and all of a sudden I see a light come on in the dash, and I don't remember if it was for low oil pressure or something. I sort of was like, that's weird, but I probably had too much to drink and was like, it'll be fine. And bang! And right away, the car starts to shudder and there's smoke everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? So I pull over and all my friends pull over with me. I ended up going to a good friend of mine at the time. He had his Range Rover, and we had this idea to actually put towels on the front of his bumper and towels on the rear of the Gallardo, and we were going to just slowly creep the Gallardo back to his house, which was probably like 4 blocks away. And Ed doesn't actually know this story yet, so this is all new to Ed. But in that process, I had the car in neutral. It actually damaged the entire rear bumper. So not only did something happen mechanically, but now I damaged my friend's Range Rover front bumper, and I damaged this car's rear bumper. And this was at 2 a.m. I wasn't going to call a truck, and it was a terrible idea. So next morning, I wake up, and I go to where the car is at my friend's house, and I go to look at it, and I realize there's oil everywhere, but okay, I'm like, maybe a hose or a line or something like that. And this was in a period where I had a lot going on. My parents were going through a divorce, and I had a lot of stress and pressure. I was juggling sort of financially everything. I didn't really have money at the time, but I had to keep up appearances and pray that this car show was going to work. Basically, my dad said he'd help me with it. He said, let's send it to I think it was Lamborghini Miami. Let's send it to Lamborghini Miami. They'll check it out. I know the guys there. So we sent it there, and I'll never forget, in the midst of my parents' divorce. I'm sitting on their couch in the living room, and I get a phone call from a friend of mine, and he actually tells me like, hey, the motor's blown. And I remember thinking like, but how? And immediately after, my dad calls me and he's like, yeah, you put a rod through the block. But how? He goes, well, it's a fairly new car. We're going to try to get it covered under warranty. You know, they say this happens with Gallardos when they're not serviced or anything like that. These things can happen with those engines. So we now know, I had driven, between 4,000 and 6,000 miles in the car, and the early Gallardos actually burned about a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. So the reality was the early cars had weak rod bearings, and you run those cars with 2 quarts of oil low, and you have a chance of complete explosion. To that date, I've never blown another engine in my life. I learned an incredible lesson about always checking your fluids. I also learned an incredible lesson about not driving cars too hard. Sort of freaks me out now, checking things like, I was driving a car around on bald tires because I couldn't afford the tires. Now, every car that we get, I'm immediately changing the tires, checking the tire date, making sure that, because you never know. I see guys driving cars hard or even revving their Lambos, hitting off the rev limiter, at Cars and Coffee. And it just sort of drives me crazy because it's like, it's something that happened to me, and it can happen, and it is catastrophic, and it's very expensive. It's a headache. So I learned an incredible lesson about just respecting cars and also understanding to always check your fluids. At the time, I would say that I always used to run from my issues and confrontation. Now, through this experience, I've actually learned that confront things head on. Confront your problems and issues head on. You can normally resolve things pretty quickly. And it's actually probably one of my strengths today. People call me a fireman. I'm great at putting out fires. Probably a week or two goes by. Unfortunately, Ed found out without me telling him. And that was terribly embarrassing because I would have obviously loved to be the first person to tell him. And at this point, this other mutual friend calls me and says, yeah, they're not going to cover the car under warranty. So I do what probably was the most stupid thing, is I avoid Ed. And I avoid Ed for a few months. And meantime, we'd randomly share some texts, and I'd say, man, I'm trying to get some money together. I'm going to try to figure this out. I'm sorry. I didn't realize this. And, Ed was pretty, I would say, calm considering the situation, considering his financial standing at the time. He was struggling to start his business. I was struggling to start my business. And in the end, I completely ghosted Ed. My life completely imploded. If you haven't heard the story about how I was arrested, I lost everything. I had $300 and something thousand in debt. So my sort of issue with Ed was somewhere in that mixture of all of my other issues. And Ed eventually took me to court. He actually, I don't even think I responded. Couldn't even afford an attorney at the time. And he basically won. Because I didn't even respond. And I felt terrible, and it was always in my gut. I think a year or two later, Ed calls me one day, and he actually says, hey, let's just figure this out. I want this out of my life. I don't want to talk about this again. I'm at Starbucks. Just meet me, and just give me whatever you have. I don't remember the exact amount. I think I met with him and gave him $1,000 or something like that. That was literally probably all I had at the time, besides having to still buy food and figure out my life. But I ended up meeting with him. He was completely gracious about it and said, okay, let's move on from this. But I still couldn't move on from it. I felt terrible about it. Ed was a friend. I felt horrible about everything I had done at that age, and I felt really bad about it. And our relationship still wasn't great. We'd randomly talk here and there, and I felt there was like this weight. So I think Ed knew that as well, because I had always mentioned, hey, I'm going to make it up to you one day. I promise I got to make it up to you somehow. And at some point, I think I helped pay his legal fees and I helped pay something else, but never really felt good about it. And when I started Lulavi, the rental car company, for a few years did really well. And I started to make money again, and I started to pay off these debts, and I started to fix everything in my life. And I told Ed, so how can I fix this? You're working at Lamborghini Atlanta. I know you can't just take all the profits out. And he tried to talk to his guys at the dealership to how we could figure out this out. And I just basically started buying cars from Ed. In the end, what's funny is we ended up becoming incredible friends again. We ended up doing a ton more deals together. I think to date now, we've probably done $10, $15 million in car deals together. And I think we've both put the water under the bridge. It's a great story about vindication, trying to fix the things you've done wrong, I do believe that people can grow and change. I do believe that you can fix the issues of your past. It's a testament to Ed is as a person. He was forgiving, and I think we all have to practice forgiveness in our lives, because look at where we are today in our friendship, and look at the great things we've done together and deals we've done together that would have never happened if he wasn't forgiving, and if I was trying to do the right thing in the end. So that is the story of how I blew up Ed's Gallardo.
Caramel is the perfect hack for any private party vehicle transaction. They'll make your deal run faster, safer, and smoother than you ever thought possible. And Caramel works with any buying or selling platform because they step in after you've made a deal to take care of all of the paperwork for the transaction, and also all the forms and paperwork that you need with any DMV in any state to get your car registered and titled. They protect both buyer and seller by safely verifying identities, and they connect to both bank accounts so that you don't have to worry about wire transfers, certifying checks, and all the other risks that usually go with a private party transaction. And for a limited time, Caramel is free to both buyers and sellers. Of course, you can add things like shipping and protection packages and things like that, but all of that is optional. So check them out now at drivecaramel.com or at the link in the description below.